Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos Saedo, and I am the Executive Director of the Office of Ignatian Spirituality of the Eastern Province of the Society of Jesus in the United States. Today, I would like to invite you to reflect on our lay vocation as educators and lay ministers. Baptism is the sacrament that gives us the dignity of daughters and sons of God. We are invited to participate by virtue of the sacrament in the mission of the church. But we are not just collaborators, but co-responsible for her mission in the world. I am delighted to host some friends and partners in mission who will help us reflect on our vocations. These 4 friends are deeply rooted in Ignatian spirituality and are in different stages of their baptismal journey. Let me introduce you to Patrick. Patrick Farmer is a middle school teacher in the Boston area. He has taught 6th and 7th grades at Shady Hill School, an independent school in Cambridge, for the past 7 years. After a period of discernment during the pandemic, Patrick felt called to pursue his vocation as a teacher in a new context. He is looking forward to teaching 6th grade this fall at Nativity Preparatory School in Boston. So welcome, Patrick, and thank you.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
Carolyn Sala is an art therapist specializing in adult inpatient psychiatry and also holds several degrees in theology from Fordham University. After spending a few years in the corporate world, Carolyn began to understand her true calling, to find and explore the intersection of art, psychology, and religion. This path has led to 25 years of work in various psychiatric units in New York and New Jersey, while teaching and continuing further religious studies. Carolyn has presented several papers at national art therapy conferences on the subject of religion, art, and psychiatric disorders, and is currently working on her doctorate in ministry at Fordham, exploring the role of spirituality and compassion in healthcare based on the actions of Saint Veronica. Carolyn, thank you and welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Justin White is a native of Philadelphia and earned his BA in sociology from Loyola University, Maryland in 2009. Directly after graduating, Justin spent 8 years as a theology teacher at Christian Rey Jesuit in Baltimore. Also, during that time, he directed the school's community service program as a component of the campus ministry office. Since 2017, he has worked at Loyola Blakefield in the areas of campus ministry, community service, diversity, inclusion, and equity work, as well as teaching theology and psychology. Justin completed the Magis program sponsored by our office and served as a board member for the Ignatian Solidarity Network. Racial equality and its intersection with education, spirituality, and mental health is a topic that he has spoken on in various contexts. He has the hopes of graduating from Loyola University in Maryland, once again, with a master's in school counseling in May 2022. Thank you, Justin, for joining us.
Looking forward to this fellowship. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we have with us Kim Smith. Kim is the 55th headmaster of Xavier High School in Manhattan. A graduate of Boston College and the University of Denver, Kim will be the first female headmaster in Xavier's 174-year history. She joins 16 other women serving as principals, headmasters at 60 Jesuit high schools across the United States. Kim was the academic vice principal at Boston College High School, and over her 20 years at BC High, she has taught English, coached diving, and served as department chair, academic dean, and vice principal for curriculum and professional development. She was the Boston Regional Director of our Contemplative Leaders in Action program and has served on the boards of 2 schools in Massachusetts. So, Kim, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So I want to start with Patrick. Patrick, please tell us about your journey, especially the one you are starting right now.
Sure. Well, it's funny. I was thinking about it in light of baptism because last week we had our daughter's baptism. She was born during the pandemic and it was sort of delayed. And I was sort of thinking about how that's like kind of a welcoming into relationship with God and with the community of faith. And just what a special moment that is. And I think for me, like as I've gotten older, the way that I've sort of lived out that relationship with God, sort of deepened it and developed it, has been through this process of discernment, of kind of learning to listen to the deepest desires of my heart and to God's invitation to live those out. So yeah, so that's like continually bearing fruit, including now as I make this sort of transition in my professional life. And I think like I used to think that discernment was kind of a one-time thing, like making the big decision, you know, to enter religious life or to get married or something like that. But the further along I get in life, I think that it's more like a sort of path that's built out of like a million little decisions every day, little yeses, little sort of moments of listening and responding. And I think that teaching like has been that for me anyway. I've always loved working with kids, even when I was a kid, as a brother, as a camp counselor, those kinds of things. But I was never really interested in like working in a classroom. And so the way I fell into teaching was I was working on an educational farm in Western Massachusetts with kids outdoors, kind of an experiential education thing. And then in August one year, all of a sudden, the teacher at there's like a one-room schoolhouse, just 7th and 8th grade, and she sort of unexpectedly had to leave. And they had no teacher, and school was going to start in 2 weeks. So the director asked me if I would step in and just cover the classroom until they could hire a full-time teacher. And so that was one of those moments of just sort of like a saying, sure, I guess, yes. And as soon as I had my first day in classroom, the first day in school, it was like a total revelation. I was like, oh my goodness, this is where I'm called to be, where I've been called to be. So I asked the director to stop the search, and just like that, I was suddenly a teacher with very little like training or experience. But that came, and I think the more that I've been in the profession and become a professional educator, the more it's been like those moments of just sort of opportunity and curiosity and saying, sure, I'd try that, or I wonder what's there. And so this latest shift has been a similar thing. For the last 7 years, I've been at Shady Hill School in Cambridge, outside of Boston, which is a sort of elite independent school. A really great place, actually. It's been a great place to grow and to learn as a teacher, as an educator. And especially this past year, I feel like with everything disrupted, I felt something new coming up in my prayer, in my heart, kind of an invitation to imagine other ways that I might live out this vocation as a teacher. And the more I listened to that, the more I felt like that was sort of the next step. And so that led me to Nativity, which is very different from Shady Hill in that it's a much smaller school and it's tuition free. And it's for low-income boys, mostly boys of color in Boston. So I think I don't know if that's kind of for my forever place or kind of the next step on the journey, but I'm excited to take what I've learned as a teacher at Shady Hill and at the farm school and other places and apply it to this work, which I really think is a work of justice and an invitation to like come and see if where God shows up there. So we'll see in the fall.
We talk about that later, maybe now or maybe later. But I want to go back now. I want to go to Kim. You know, Kim, you are the first female leader of a school, an all boys school. How do you see that as part of your vocation, leading a school for all boys?
Thanks for that question. It's a good question. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. I've always been in all boys school. So I started at Regis Jesuit High School in Aurora, Colorado. and I moved from there to Boston for 20 years. And all of the work that I've done in education has been with boys. So I've read Little Men by Louisa May Alcott. I've studied it. And I'm attached to what it affords the young men who are now in my charge. I'm attached to helping them become the best versions of themselves. I'm also aware that my being named the headmaster, the first female headmaster in the 170, going into our 175th year this year, means a lot to a lot of people. I think it's provoked pride in alums. I actually just got a phone call from an alum in the class of 1958 who just wanted to congratulate me and share his support on behalf of his classmates. I think it provoked a lot of pride in alum, and I think it provokes a lot of provokes a lot of pride in other women who have done this work for a long time. I'm actually speaking to you today from, and I don't know if it's okay to say this for the recording, but on the feast day of Mary Magdalene, and I think of her a lot in terms of being an apostle to the apostles. And I pray with her, and in that scene in the gospel where she turns to Christ and doesn't recognize him, and in her seeking of him so fiercely, she looks him in the eyes and says, "Where are you?" without knowing that's what she was asking. And so I'm inspired often by that gospel passage, but I'm also inspired often by, there's so many women, sisters of Ursula, sisters of the Sacred Heart, who've inspired me, who've led educators for a really long time. And so I'm happy to be a point of pride for them, and it provokes me to want to make sure I do good work on behalf of the young men of Xavier.
Thank you very much, Kim. And thank you for reminding us of the celebration of today. So thank you. Carolyn, your work in education is a little bit different, but you are an educator at heart. Okay. So how do you see yourself sent in mission?
Well, actually, I have taught religion in 2 high schools, and did a little bit in college as well. And then I wound up in computers. Don't even ask. So basically, I was sitting in my cubicle day after day, having a good time with the material, but also doing a lot of coloring, doing a lot of all kinds of art. And after a while, my manager came over and just said, "Listen, we got to talk about this. What are you doing?" And I said, I just feel better after I've done some artwork. And she said, "Have you ever heard of art therapy?" So I went to hear about it, and I left my job after a few years, and I studied and became an art therapist. And it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I wound up in psychiatry. And at first I really didn't want to go. I said, I want to be around healthy people. I want to be around whole people. Well, let's define what healthy and whole actually is. So there I was. I was working in psychiatry, inpatient units, meeting people at the worst times of their lives very often. And after about 10 years or so, I began to realize, what? I don't have to keep just working on psychology here like everyone else is doing. I'm going to start putting in some spirituality and see what happens. And not for everyone, but for many clients, boy, they wanted to talk about where God was for them right then in their lives. And so I wound up using teaching skills. I wound up using my psychology skills, and it was a gift. And I've recently retired because the gift is a pretty intense one. And after 25 years, you need to put the ribbon back on your gift. I'm looking really now at working outpatient and to see where God is leading me at this point in my life. I love what Patrick was saying about discernment. I find that I have this gut feeling at times, and I reach for where I feel I should be going, and my brain has to somehow catch up with my heart. And so when we're talking about being called, the deepest part of me is hearing the calling, and the other part of me is trying to figure out, wow, what are we doing now? This is scary, but I want to do it. So here I am in a really wild mixture, really on the verge, just like everyone is talking about. So here I am.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Thank you for your perspective. I'm going to go to Justin now. Now, Justin, your work on racial justice cannot be highlighted enough. How does that inform your vocation, your call to being an educator?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Carlos. And like Patrick, I'm going to kind of house it in the context of the baptismal call. And it was really exciting and really consoling to think about the work, the call for racial justice as a connection to that baptismal call. I'm a convert to the faith. So I went through RCIA as a high school senior and got the big three, like I like to call them, at the Easter Vigil. So that was a very pivotal moment for my faith, for my development, for all those different things. And as an educator in this period of history right now, where it's just so hard to deny the importance of equity, racial equity, and equity of all different kinds of level, having a chance to think about those two things has been really, really, like I said, really consoling. And so through prayer and discernment, just looking at the scripture, I felt myself being called back to Jesus being baptized. And there was two things from that series that just was really speaking to me that I think is connected to how I want to go about racial equity and equity work, and how I feel that, nation spirituality and the church can go about it as well, too. The first is, this is Jesus and John getting back together after, who knows how long they haven't seen each other. And the first time they meet, right, we're told that John leaps for joy. And so, can you imagine Jesus and John coming together in this moment? They are family, but they're also co-laborers in this very dangerous mission. We know that both of them are going to go on to be executed by those in power, executed by the state. So I can't help but think about them coming together in this scene, and John being like, hey, I'm not worthy to do this. And Jesus being like, no, let's do this. And that just tells me that, especially for BIPOC, and if we're looking at the intersections for those women, for LGBTQ, for those who have visible disabilities and those who have invisible disabilities, kinship, fellowship, brotherhood, sisterhood, fraternity, solidarity, sodality, all those things are going to be really important as we build this kingdom. And I just think about what empowerment John must have felt when Jesus said, no, let's do this. And what empowerment Jesus felt from John to say, like, hey, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're doing this. So for me, it's a reminder that as I'm doing this work and as I'm co-laboring with other people and as I'm teaching, my young people, to constantly remind them, do this in community, do this in kinship, do this in fellowship. And then the second thing that really stands out to me is the baptism of Jesus himself, so that the heavens rip open, the Spirit comes down, and we hear, this is my beloved Son with whom I'm well pleased. And who among us is not impacted by a parent or a guardian or a mentor or a coach saying, hey, I'm pleased, I'm proud of you. But the kicker is Jesus hasn't done anything yet. He hasn't done any miracles. He hasn't necessarily started his ministry, but yet we hear God is pleased with him. And so often, unfortunately, in this work and in the work in our society, once again, BIPOC, women, LGBTQ, those with disabilities, have to work harder to have their dignity recognized. And what would it look like if we delighted in people's existence just from that? That's the starting point. Regardless what you're done or what you're going to do, we delight in your presence. We're glad you're here. We're thankful that you're here. And we actually want to find out, how can we show you that we're glad you're here? And so that's a constant reminder to me as an educator, as someone that wants to go into the mental health field later on in life as well, that's the starting point. Your dignity is there. I'm glad you're here. We'll get to the other stuff, but that's my starting point for you. And I think that's a great way to be. And I think Ignatian spirituality very much invites us to view folks in our work that same way too.
That is beautiful, Justin. So thank you for reminding us that. And just have a quick question for all of us. What's next? After we discover that we are somehow sent or we have a call, what's next? How do we foster our own vocations? What helps us? For example, in my life, what Patrick said about baptism. The times that I've seen my daughters being baptized has been a good reminder that I'm called, I'm chosen, and I'm sent. I've learned to enjoy using water for the sign of the cross as a reminder of who I am and where I'm supposed to go. So for all of you, simply, what's next? How do you foster your vocation?
I can speak to that, I think, from a baptismal way, if that helps. There's a sense in the passage that I mentioned earlier of Mary Magdalene sort of feeling lost or stuck, even though she was looking at Christ. And there's something beautiful. And unlike Justin, who has a memory of his baptism, I have no memory of my baptism, but I do know that I was held and loved by my parents and my godparents. And I do know that there was lit candles, there was light, there was a tenderness of touch at the anointing. And then I got dunked. And I think we all got dunked. And I think there's something baptismal about that. And for me, there's something about how you come out of that dunking, that you let yourself fully submerge in a conversion moment. And you come out of it wet, and you come out of it like Mary Magdalene, ready to announce. And so for me, when you're thinking about change or transition, which is where I am right now, I think there's a commitment to that announcement, and there's a commitment to the full body dunkedness that really speaks to me, that I think there's an embracingness to it, but there's also something sort of startling about it that you have to kind of jump into. And I appreciate that about the journey.
Thank you, Kim. That's beautiful too. Anybody else?
I can chime in. I love Kim's metaphor of the dunking. I feel like as a new teacher, I have felt that so many times, of being kind of completely overwhelmed by the demanding work of teaching. And that sort of like makes me question sometimes, like, oh my gosh, have I made the wrong choice? Is this not where I'm called to be? And that's where I think it's really important to be in prayer, in relationship with God. What I found is, like, just because it's been challenging doesn't mean that it's not where I'm called to be right now. And so I think, like, the challenge there has been to, like, look for God in those moments of challenge. Like, okay, so what is the call in this difficult situation with a student or a family, or the sort of like load of work, the sort of burnout? Looking for God in those places can be both sustaining and can kind of continue this ongoing process of discernment within the career choice.
That's true, Patrick. Prayer is very important. I think especially when we pray with others, that we feel supported and embraced, as Kim was saying. So that's very important. That helps me in my own vocation. So anybody?
I'm finding that approaching the whole person is extremely important. I know that for myself, I'm heavily educated. I've had a great religious training, and I've gone on through theology, but a lot of it is very often head work. So I've balanced it out myself with body work, such as Qigong from the Chinese tradition. And I find that when I'm leading workshops, I'm inviting people to use their imagination. Just as in Ignatian spirituality, when we step in and we use our imagination, we put ourselves into the scene. I find that challenging people to give it a try is just a really great thing. And to watch people, it feeds me to watch other people develop their spirituality in a new way. So for me, it's imagination and body work, getting out of the head.
That is so true, Caroline. That our faith and our spirituality was very tactile. It's about the whole person. Yeah. We start our journey of faith by being dunked in water, being blessed, being touched. It's so important to remember that in our teaching, in our life as a family member, etc., etc. So thank you for reminding us that that's so important. So Justin, anything else to say?
Yeah, it's funny that folks have been talking about being dunked during baptism. So I really wanted to be dunked during baptism, but the procedure we had at the church was the sprinkling. So that makes me think about, even though I might not have been dunked at baptism, but I'm called in my vocation, I'm called in my work to be dunked, to allow myself to be dunked. And I think that goes to that body work that Caroline's talking about as well. So when I'm working with individuals that are culturally different or whatever, I'm called to immerse myself. I could just sprinkle, right, and be on the surface, and I can come off performative, or I can allow myself to enter into the chaos, the joy, the pain, the victories, and see how then I'm called to be a co-laborer in that. In high school, I got introduced to that scripture passage, the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. And I just remember being like, I like that. Like there's something about it. I'm feeling called to that. And then just over these past years, the harvest continues to grow. And I think the biggest challenge for me personally is to remember that there is a harvest, right? So there is good in the world, and there is seeds that need to be planted, and there's crops that need to be brought in, and we can take the living water of the baptism and help that harvest continue to grow.
Well, I just want to say thank you all for sharing your baptismal journeys with us. I really appreciate that. And I am sure that when Ignatius was thinking of how his way of proceeding was going to impact the lives of men and women, he envisioned people just like you. So muchas gracias, and thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Brien, the Director of Ignatian Formation Initiatives for the Office of Ignatian Spirituality. I'd like to share a few questions on our brief panel discussion for your prayer and reflection. I'm grateful for the insights provided by Kim, Carolyn, Patrick, and Justin, who've just shared with us some of their wisdom and experience. I'm also grateful for the dedication and commitment shown by those of you viewing this, my fellow Ignatian educators and formators. Thank you. I hope these questions will assist you in contemplating your own Ignatian vocational journey. Was there a story or comment from one of our panelists that you felt a deep resonance with, and why? How has your baptismal call led you to where you are today? What were some key choices you've made that have been important in your own vocational journey? And finally, moving forward, what would you like to bring to prayer or reflect on in exploring your personal baptismal call?